I'm getting closer to deciding whether or not to run a half Ironman.
What is half iron?
Well,
What's the other
iron's
half?
on the periodic table,
Mhm.
so it's just Fe. I guess if you did F, that would be like, what element is F?
I don't even know. I'm not going to say now. Fluorine, is that an element?
Yeah, I mean fluorine is an element, but yeah, and that's what F is. Yeah, F is fluorine.
Nice.
Interesting.
Nailed it.
Molecular weight of
What-
18.9.
What is half of the molecular weight of Fe?
Half of it?
Yeah, half iron.
What? No, but iron's Fe.
Yeah. So what is that molecular weight?
Molecular weight of iron is 55.8.
Okay, so what's like 27 or 28 molecular weight?
This says 27 is aluminum.
I could see that.
Cobalt is 27 roughly. So aluminum yeah, let's go with that. That's close enough.
Running aluminum, man.
Mm-hmm. So stupid. So stupid. I don't know. I went to Half Price Books and I looked for a training plan, because I feel like whenever you Google online, you're like, hey, what's your training plan for good training plan for half Ironman? And they're like, oh, go check out this website or that website. And I'm not opposed to like paying for a training plan, but it seems to me the kind of thing that probably exists in a book that is probably more well thought out than just a PDF on a website. And I was like, well, maybe I could go to Half Price Books and find someone who's either failed to run or ran and doesn't need the book anymore.
This is a very boomer solution to this problem. You're like, I want to do a new thing. Let me go find a book.
I'm
learn it from a book.
No,
Let me go check one out from the library. Yeah, why didn't you do that? Why didn't you go to the library?
You know what? That's not a bad idea. I probably should have gone to the library. Listen, Daniel, listen.
YouTube is all you need.
No, YouTube is fine. Maybe this is just what's the word? Not like conspiracy, but or like old man shouts at cloud. But I feel like a lot of the internet is getting sucked into groupthink, and it's we're all relying on these search engines to find things, and whatever's on the top 10, that's what everyone thinks the answer is to everything. And so if I'm looking for a training plan, there's like some good suggestions on Reddit, and we can go like see what people are recommending there. But if you're not looking in like a forum or a group or a Reddit post and you're just like searching, I mean, it's just going to be like the same plan that everyone's using. And it's like, now there's only one plan.
Only one plan.
Versus maybe there's like, it's the same conversation as recipes. Maybe there's recipes out there. Maybe there's training plans out there that don't exist on the internet because everyone grew up with the internet, so they only know the things that are on the internet. I'm trying to find those innovative approaches that exist outside the internet.
Well, and maybe if you find a training plan that nobody else knows about, maybe it would give you a different set of advantages in the race.
That's
right?
That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
And so I found two books at Half Price Books. Both were Reader Digest books on how to fix everything in your house.
Perfect. That's exactly what you need.
Like,
did you get that book?
Yeah, I did.
Did you get both of those books?
Yeah, I did.
Are they the same? Why do you need two copies?
One's more like how to fix appliances type things, and one's more like how to, make the correct angled doorway. Like, this book would have been really helpful whenever we replaced that door in my house and we had to reframe it. I'm just saying it would have been super helpful.
Well, now you have it.
Yeah, I got these great resources, but I also found the Triathlon Bible.
Ooh.
I think is what it was called, and it's like hundreds of pages and walks you through like how to like build out your, like, if this is how you would build out a year of training and how to like plan your races and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so
that sounds like what you were looking for.
A little bit, yeah. And so I have my calendar. And now I'm starting to like fill in my training blocks on like when I would need to start and what those training blocks would look like. And it feels like I'm just barreling towards signing up for the half Ironman.
I feel like if you do, you might have to buy a Timex Ironman watch.
That would be pretty cool.
It'd be pretty appropriate.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it wouldn't quite do all the things that my Garmin does, but I feel
close enough.
I should have one of those.
I mean, mine has a heart rate monitor.
Maybe if I run the half Ironman, I should get one of those.
I think you should.
And then scrape off half of the logo.
Welcome back to the Camera Gear Podcast. I'm Daniel,
And I'm Lucas.
and we're here today to talk about the gear, software, and techniques we use to shoot photos and video.
Okay, so I shot with my XH2S with my V-mount solution, and I used the dummy battery today, and there was nothing to report. No issues.
Which is
no
good.
undervolting, no power. I turned the camera on and off here and there, but I shot for like 90 minutes, shooting clips the whole time, not continuous, and I used 25% of the battery, 26%, something like that.
Of the 99 watt hour.
Of the 99 watt hour, he's about 26%. So in this case, hauling that camera out, I should have used the 50 watt hour battery because that would have been much lighter. Regardless, it was good. Yeah. So, 2 thumbs up for V-mount rig when you're powering a monitor and a camera.
Great. You, your dummy battery was the blind spot one, I think. Is that who makes it?
No.
Okay. And
Then my other one was the one that I had in my XT3 was a blind
I
spot
see.
one. The one that I got for the XH2S is not.
I see. And how does it plug into the battery? Is that a barrel jack?
Yeah, it's an 8-volt barrel jack,
Nice.
2.1 millimeter.
I think I have that same dummy battery, and I've just been a little cautious of using it because I feel like if that power gets interrupted for an instant, then all of a sudden you've lost your lost something. And I've actually been meaning to test like what the camera does if you like cut power while it's recording. I assume it does save the file,
Generally, it does. Yeah.
but and that would maybe help a little bit. But I've always run a USB into my camera. So that I have the internal battery in there kind of like as a backup, I guess, so that if the power gets interrupted, it's not going to mess it up. But that situation has issues too, because like the USB can't quite keep up with the battery. And so like I always end up with, down a little bit on my internal battery at the end, and that doesn't feel great.
Also, it's maybe a less secure connection. Like I have the HDMI going into my camera, then I have one of those clamps that holds the HDMI connection, so I'm not screwing with the port. And then I feel fine about something like a mic jack, but those are the only ones that I have running into the camera and not having a USB-C kind of dangling out the side.
Yeah.
I would be worried I would snap that puppy
Yeah,
off.
it's not great. I do have a right angle USB-C on it, so at least there's that. But yeah, it's kind of a downside.
So it worked out good for me today.
Cool. Glad to hear that. You powered the Ninja, I think, too, right?
Yeah, I was powering the Ninja.
Nice.
I didn't shoot any ProRes or RAW.
It seemed like you mentioned being happier with the Ninja screen over the small HD.
It's just a cleaner, brighter, higher resolution screen.
Yeah. Do you feel like you might, whether you're recording or not on the Ninja, you feel like you might keep using the Ninja as a monitor?
Yeah, I got it all rigged out at this point, and I'm using the full-size HDMI. The small HD mini HDMI in is just such a nightmare, and the screen looks so terrible.
Yeah.
Like, it's fine, but I'm going to retire that thing.
Yeah.
Or use it for, like, one-off stuff.
I still feel like the Ninja is not, like, if what you want is a monitor, the Ninja is probably not the right choice because it's kind of heavy. Takes a long time to power on.
No, most of
these
the
settings
new-
are not really like appropriate for that, but I can see how it's better than what you had.
Most of the new Portkey stuff is better for that kind of thing. I think that, having the Ninja now kind of integral into the workflow and that actually fully set up, it kind of opened up some opportunities for shooting external ProRes and that sort of stuff. And I've been wanting to do more of that. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I think that I'll keep that kind of in play and not buy a separate monitor for now.
Yeah, it makes sense. Cool.
Yeah,
Glad that all went well.
I guess so. I assume you have nothing to report. You just flew a drone the whole time.
Yeah, I did use my camera a little bit, but mostly I flew the drone around. And it's one of those things where big event, like people always want the drone footage, and it's kind of nice because you just launch it and then go find a shady spot and just sit there and you don't have to run around. So.
Yeah, not sweating through your shirt.
Yep.
And for things like this, they wouldn't have wanted me to take my shirt off and just
Probably
running around shirtless with a camera.
No, I think that they would have frowned on that for sure.
Yeah,
So.
wasn't one of those kind of events.
I will say I used the, what is it called? I think it's called the DJI RC. I'm pretty sure it's the name, but basically a controller for the drone that has a screen built in. And this is, I think, the second time I've used that. It worked pretty well. I think it runs Android. Like I'm pretty sure it's basically an Android phone built into that controller.
I would believe it.
Yeah. But it works pretty well. It's definitely nice to not have your phone in use for that, because I always hated, like, for one thing, if I get a call or something, I'm kind of out of luck because I'm flying the drone. But also, like, if it's in the sun and stuff, it just feels like my phone's heating up for no reason. And it's all just like, I'd rather have the drone be a self-contained thing. And besides screen brightness, like the brightness on that thing isn't as good as a phone. But besides that, it's definitely nicer having a dedicated controller and screen for the drone.
It's frustrating that the screen isn't brighter. I would have thought that would have been one of the priorities for that kind of device, is something that can do like 2,000 nits. And I was surprised when you told me it was only 1,000.
Yeah, so they do have a newer version. Mine's the DJI RC, and I think for some of the newer drones, I think they have an RC2. I'm not sure if they increased the brightness there. And then there's also something called a DJI Smart Controller, which I think that one does have a very bright screen, but it's also like $1,100, like for the controller. So it's quite a bit, kind of ridiculous. The one I got's like $250 or something. So I figured, most of the time I don't really want to be out in the sun anyway. So, you go to a shady spot and it's fine. You can see just fine.
All right. Okay, let's get into the actual notes here. You're going to have to explain this next one.
Yeah. So, we shot this event in the morning, and then we stopped to get lunch, and then came over here to record the podcast. And with this being the Camera Gear podcast, really, we probably should have instead had the next item on this list, which is the OM System curry. So OM System, the same OM System you think I'm talking about, makes a Japanese curry called Outdoor Monster.
I got nothing.
Yeah.
I got nothing here. Is it just you have to mix it and make it? It looks like it comes in a box. I don't understand.
Yeah, I don't fully understand like the lifestyle around this Japanese curry. So I'm not sure like how it kind of comes across, like from reading this Petapixel article. It makes it seem like this is like a category of product, like you can just buy like Japanese curries. And this is just an option in that lineup. And so yeah, I actually don't know how you like cook it, I guess. And in the article, they do say they wish they had some rice with it. So maybe you have to add your own rice.
Sure.
But yeah, this says it's a staple in the Asian household that is ubiquitous as mac and cheese in the U.S. because it is quick to make and absolutely delicious.
Fully cooked and packaged to be heated when boiling water over a camping stove.
Yeah. So OM Systems is really trying to to comprehensively cover the needs of the outdoor photographer. And so, you can buy their cameras that are, ruggedized and weather sealed and et cetera. You can buy, all the lenses to get, your bird shots or landscapes or whatever. And now you can also buy curry so you can have lunch while you're out shooting.
It's ridiculous. This is absolutely ridiculous. Yeah. I don't have thoughts. I don't have opinions.
But Lucas, it features ox tongue, chicken, and a variety of nutritious vegetables.
Okay, so Blackmagic did their
No. One more thing. So first off, spice level is apparently like decently high, but not as high as spice level of other global curries. They think most people would be able to handle it. And these are the Petapixel guys, so I think they're Canadian. I feel like we can handle more spice from them.
Oh, almost certainly.
This is only here's what I want to get to. This is only available in Japan.
No, when we go to Japan, we are not getting this. Absolutely not.
If we find this, Lucas, we have to get it, and then next podcast episode after that, we have to give our review of the OM System curry.
Absolutely ridiculous. You're right, but
you want to find some hipster film camera in Japan. I want to find OM System curry.
I want to buy some of that Fujifilm, like Provia film that they only sell in Japan. That's now like $40 a roll.
Well, you can get some of that, and I'll get some OM System curry, and we'll both come away happy.
I'll be more happy than you will be, almost certainly at that point.
Fine.
Blackmagic held their event at NAB.
Yes.
And the stream was like 3 hours long, and you watched the whole thing. I watched some of it, and they announced a lot of cool stuff. There were some really neat updates to DaVinci Resolve, tons of like streaming and blah, blah, blah. is one thing I want to talk about, and that's the Pyxis 12K.
Yep. Yeah, that was the star of the show. We kind of knew it was coming because as sometimes happens with these conventions, they had big posters, they put up outside the convention center, like the decorations basically for the convention. And I guess Blackmagic is a big sponsor of NAB, and so there was a big poster that said Pyxis 12K, so we knew it was coming. And I think it was the last thing they announced in that marathon stream, which, by the way, they did it exactly the way they have in the past, QVC style. Blackmagic CEO standing behind this counter, just like talking about
QVC.
Yeah, have you never heard of that? The shopping channel, on TV.
Okay,
you've never heard of this?
I've never heard of it called QVC.
That's the name of the channel. So, it's just he's standing behind a counter. He's talking about a product, and then he's like, "Let me show you," and he just reaches down below and like pulls out, video switcher, cinema camera, etc., and just does that over and over. Super like deadpan delivery, very casual about everything.
He doesn't like get pumped about anything. It's just he's just like, "Oh yeah, now we have this, and this is really cool. This is really cool. You're gonna love it. It's so good," but just mostly monotone. And so if you're looking for whenever he's going to maybe start ramping up his excitement to know when he's going to announce something, he doesn't. And so you'll miss it. That's what happened to me, because it's like going on over here and he's like talking about stuff and I look over and I'm like, what, is that a new camera? When did he what? Back up. Oh, and he announced autofocus before this? Hold shit, back up. It was ridiculous.
Yeah. I like it. I think it's very authentic. My favorite part is whenever he starts instructing whoever's behind the camera to do something. Like, he'll hold a product up and he'll say, "Make sure you get a close up of this." And it's like he's directing from behind the counter. There, he knows how he wants it to look, and it's great. I really enjoy their presentations.
They are something. Okay, so of the things they announced, what we're talking about here is the new Pyxis 12K, which simply stated is a Blackmagic Pyxis with the 12K sensor from the Ursa Cine 12K.
Yeah.
They did additionally announce that they're going to sell a version of the Ursa 12K stripped down.
Yeah, well, they had announced that previously. I think they just this was the first presentation they've done since that came out, and I thought it was funny. This is their CEO talking, and he said, "I don't know why we never offered it that way to begin with, but here it is." So,
well, previously, it came with everything, with like the batteries and the hard drives and like the whole 9 yards, and it was $15,000. And I think that, they announced it at around like 7 or 8 or something like that. It's like $8,000 or $9,000 with just stripped down, so it's just the camera.
Yeah.
But anyway, Pyxis 12K, same sensor. Otherwise, it seems like maybe not much more to this other than the sensor change. It's like same CF Express, same B mount battery that you have to like adapt out to V mount if you want to go that route. Still doesn't ship with a screen. They did announce the screen that you can have come with your monitor,
which had again already been available, but they just talked about it in this presentation.
Yeah, and it seemed pretty good.
Honestly, I think everything else is the same. We also should talk about the new accessories they announced, but I would say it seemed enough the same that my guess would be this is what they had in mind when they released the first Pyxis.
I think that the swap to the 12K sensor unlocks a lot of stuff, and I want to spend about 20 minutes talking about the sensor. But first, I really want to cover those two new accessories. And so they said, "Oh, hey, so we think that maybe here's some new accessory options for this camera that we think will make it a lot better for broadcast solution."
Yeah, because I think he was saying like he thinks broadcast should look more like cinematic or something.
Sure, but the two accessories that they announced make it turn the Pyxis into a camcorder, and
they really do.
And I'm like, what is the CEO's impression of someone who runs broadcast? Because when I think of someone running broadcast, they have like headphones on and they're like monitoring the camera. Like rarely are they trying to like put it up to the eye to hold it like a camcorder, like a 90s dad. They look like Ryan Gosling from the movie Nightcrawler, just like creeping around, like holding the camera up to their eye. I'm like, who's doing this? Who like?
Yep.
I don't know. I'm thinking of anyone who runs a camera from any 90s movie like Scream or Dante's Peak, or I don't know. It's just Ridiculous.
Yeah, so they announced a top handle type thing that has a shotgun mic on the front and is a top handle and has an EVF at the back. So like you put that thing on there and that's basically like the top part of your camcorder. And then they also announced a side handle, which honestly, like,
I'm on board with the side handle.
I like both of these things personally, but like, like the side handle thing seems like, gives you that kind of fabric hand grip that you've seen on a camcorder.
Where you slide your hand in so you're cupping the camera and then you strap your hand to it.
And I think it also has a record button on that side.
It does.
And so like, I'm like, I can see this for like a run and gun type setup. Honestly, like I'm pretty into these accessories. I think it's cool.
I mean, if I had a Pyxis, I would be very motivated to have both of these so that I could camcorder this thing. It would be the most ridiculous camcorder since the Sony NEX.
I saw some article position it the way they announced this news was saying it turns the Pyxis into a skateboarding camera from the 90s, which like I think that's the way to think of it in terms of like this is why people would want it, not for broadcast.
It turns it into a $5,500 plus accessory, a $7,000 skateboarding camera that shoots 12K video.
When I think of broadcast, you mentioned like headphones and stuff. I think of shoulder rig.
Sure.
And it's same thing. It's like I'm not, you're not using this like this little handheld thing, but I don't know. Maybe. I mean, I think they're cool accessories.
I love it, but it's the way that he pitched it. I was like, I think there's a market for this. I don't know if it's what you're saying, but okay.
Do you think the market is the other thing that he said about the Pyxis?
He's like, I want to take it on holiday.
Yeah, he's like, I can't wait to get my hands on one of these so that I can take it on holiday. I'm like, yeah, you would do that. Your 12K cinema camera.
Yep.
Filming the giraffes at the zoo.
It's just so funny to think about. You can just see him with just holding it up to his eye, dad style,
and then making his same comments that he makes about the products, where he's like, "That's very nice. It's so nice. I love this."
Yep. Golly, ridiculous. Okay, so the Pyxis 12K pre-orders start in June. Mm-hmm. Is that right?
Yep.
They announced it at $5,000, and then they changed it to $6,500, and then they changed it to $5,500.
U.S. pricing on all that.
Yeah, U.S. pricing
because of what's happening in the news right now.
Yeah. So whatever. Well, it'll be worth some amount of money, and you'll be able to pre-order it sometime in June. Hopefully,
price is a question mark.
TBD. But at the original price, when they announced this thing at $5,000, I was like, Is this the best camera for $5,000 for video?
It's pretty good.
They showed a Pocket Cinema or a Cinema 6K where they added autofocus, like tracking continuous autofocus.
Yeah.
And they're like, this is going to come to some of our other lines. And so I'm assuming they're going to bring that to the Pyxis as well.
It seems possible. I mean, I guess I don't have any information to suggest either way, but it's kind of autofocus is kind of a new thing for Blackmagic to offer. And so with them offering it on some of those cheaper models, it makes it seem like it would come to the rest.
Okay. So we've hemmed and hawed about whether or not Daniel needs to buy Pyxis for the last 3 weeks at least. Mm-hmm. And I've been kind of down on it. But now with this coming out, I'm like, well, maybe now it makes sense.
You just needed 6 more Ks.
I needed 6 more Ks. Well, part of my rub was that I don't feel like the Pyxis 6K it's better than like an X-H2S, but it's not that much better, especially for the stuff that we shoot, that it was like, it doesn't really make sense to uproot everything. And when they announced this, I was like, okay, cool. Yeah. 12K sensor. And then I had to go back and reacquaint myself with this sensor and with the Ursa 12K. And I feel like this specific sensor makes the Pyxis so much more appealing.
Yeah.
The Ursa 12K is pitched as a cinema camera that is to compete with things such as a Raptor, a V-Raptor, or a Venice, or an Arri Alexa, which are all cameras that are 2 to 5 times more expensive. Mm-hmm. The storage for a Venice, for 8 terabytes of storage for a Venice, cost as much as an Ursa 12K with the storage included.
Like $15,000, $16,000.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. And it's worth noting that, and we'll get into it a little bit, but because I do want to talk about a lot of the mode options that you get for the Pyxis 12K, but because of, I think it's because of the write speed of the cards, but also power and that sort of thing. The Pyxis 12K operates essentially half the speed as the Ursa almost across the board. Like if you go look at the frames per second that you can deliver in the 12K on the Pyxis, they're close to half, maybe 80% of that for the Ursa 12K. You're not going to be able to shoot like, the higher, I think it's like 12K open gate on the Pyxis is like 40 frames per second. And I think you can do like 60 or 80 or something on the Ursa. I may be getting that not quite right, but you can do more reads, more frames per second, but also the rolling shutter is different. So like if you shoot 8K on the Ursa, you're going to get like sub 10 millisecond rolling shutter. Whereas if you do it, it's like 6 or something, or like 7 milliseconds. But on the Pyxis, it's going to be closer to like 15.
Yeah. So Blackmagic published numbers on those. Those aren't guesses on our part. Like they did publish a thing, and yeah, it's about twice the rolling shutter on the Pyxis 12K. I saw some people online saying that might have something to do with like the voltage that the camera runs at, and kind of thinking, and that makes it sound maybe less like a card write speed thing and more like a processing power,
Could
or
be,
just
yeah.
like the power available in the camera to process the data. I mean, honestly, it's probably all the above. It's probably that, they have a lower power budget for the smaller camera, and, that combined with the slower media, just kind of limits it in some ways.
Yeah, which you're saying slower media, but Daniel, this thing has CF Express Type B. You've touted that is the best media that's ever existed.
It's pretty fast.
But I guess the modules that you can buy are like NVMe drives or whatever that mount into these modules that can go into the Ursa, and those are faster than CF Express Type B.
I think they might have increased the speed of the USB-C on the Pyxis. That might be one of the different.
Didn't they add like 10G or something for?
They did
for the Ethernet, because you're now dealing with those higher resolutions.
Yeah. So they did make some changes to the rest of the hardware to maybe support this bigger sensor.
Yeah, so the 12K 3x2 open gate readout is 24 milliseconds, which is like acceptable. And then 8K open gate is 13. 4K open gate is also 13. So like, and then if you shoot in whatever, like a 16:9, you're going to get down into like 10 millisecond range.
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of reminds me of what we talked about with the S1R Mark II, where, like some of if you shoot in the absolute highest resolution, your rolling shutter is a little bit worse, but I'm okay with that as long as there are modes I can use that don't feel super compromised in terms of like resolution or whatever. But as long as there are modes that can get a faster rolling shutter for situations where that matters, which it feels like these numbers are still good enough to where you get that.
To me, I think that the 8K mode on the Pyxis 12K is like the sweet spot. And that itself is like 10 milliseconds faster than the 6K version of the Pyxis. And so you're going to get a higher resolution, better image, and faster readout speed than the base model. And like, I think the resolution things out of this sensor make it just super, super interesting. We talked a bit like last episode or one before on the GFX 100 RF, and kind of like once you get into those higher megapixels, like doing things like cropping and stuff start making more sense. You can kind of do a lot of interesting things, which is why that new like GFX Eterna camera seems really interesting, because they're using that 100 megapixels. This is close to that. This is like 80 megapixels because of the resolution, but like the sensor itself is wildly interesting. It's like super, super unique, and I want to dig into that just a smidge here. A smidge means a lot.
Yep.
In this case.
Let's do it.
Okay, so this sensor is looking at the Cine-D results and all the tests. They claim 16 stops of dynamic range. It's basically true. If you do like the IMA test and you do like those kind of dynamic range tests, they're getting maybe in the 15 range as far as all stops, and then clean, you're going to get somewhere between 13.5 and like 14.8, almost 15 stops. And then you can always apply noise reduction in post, because it's Blackmagic Raw, so like there is no noise reduction.
Yeah.
And then the highlight recovery is really good off of Blackmagic Raw and DaVinci Resolve. And so if you're doing highlight recovery and a little bit of noise reduction, you can start pushing like 15 stops of dynamic range, which is pretty significant, especially for a 12K sensor. So like 12K is a pretty decent resolution.
It's pretty high.
And
there aren't that many cameras hitting that.
But as a result of getting 12K into a full frame sensor, your pixel pitch is like 2.2, which is fairly small. We talked about the GFX 100 RF, that 102 megapixel sensor is a 5.76 or something like that, 5 point something pixel pitch, which is basically the same as like an XH2S, I think, or a Sony A7R5. It's in that 5 range. It's going to be not quite as big as something like an FX3 because it's a 12 megapixel sensor. It's going to have a really big pixel pitch. But that it really matters because that's like how much light you can capture in your light buckets or whatever. Yeah. And so if you have a really small pixel pitch of like 2.2, usually that's going to murder your dynamic range. But the reason that it doesn't for this camera and the why it performs so well is because it is not a bare sensor. It is an RBGW sensor.
Which means what?
So a bare normally is like you might have a 2x2 pixel array of greens and reds and blues. And on a bare sensor, you have twice as many greens as you have red and blue because green is more prevalent light source. And so like you're going to get, basically you use your greens to determine your brightness.
Right.
Essentially.
Yeah.
And then,
so like one of the first episodes of this podcast we talked about.
Yeah, we did. And so like if you're looking at a bare pixel array, you have a set of 4 subpixels that are 2 red, a red and a blue across from each other, and then a green and a green across from each other. And so what they've done here for this 12K sensor is that it's like for a bare, that 4 pattern is repeated over and over and over and over. For an RBGW pattern, there's 2 different ways you can do it. You can kind of do it in a bare array where you just swap out a green with a white. And a white means no color filter. It's just taking in light data, period. What this is particularly different in that it's not just swap out a green with a white, so it's 1 green, 1 white, 1 blue, 1 red. It is a 6x6 pattern. And so it's still like 2 green, 2 white, 1 blue, 1 red, I think is the final arrangement. And you can like go look up pictures of what this looks like. But essentially it's a 6x6 arrangement of pixels where you have 2 white pixels within those arrays. And because the white pixels it's like a black and white camera where like you can get more light data on a black and white sensor, a monochrome sensor versus a color filter.
Because you're not filtering out the colors.
Yeah, exactly. And so they can use those whites to do the luma for the image, and then they can use the RGBs to then do the chroma and the color. And as a result, they're able to get these wild dynamic ranges off of such a high resolution sensor.
Yeah, that's interesting.
But then what it also allows them to do is they can split the pixels, those pixel groupings up more effectively because it's a 6x6 grid instead of a 2x2 grid. And so I'm sure we're all kind of familiar with quad bare sensors where it's like, here's a 48 megapixel sensor that can work as a 12 megapixel sensor because you like bin the pixels together. And like, but that's not really binning because it's like the pixels are acting like one big pixel instead of one 48 small pixels kind of thing. This is essentially doing that. It's not skipping lines. It's not binning the image. The quality and color of the image is the same regardless of if you shoot in 8K or 4K or 12K, but it allows you to group pixels together into like larger quote unquote subpixels that then allow you to shoot the full width of the sensor.
Interesting.
And so they're shooting in actual RAW, which we've talked about before, like Blackmagic RAW does have some demosaicing happening like a little bit, but not fully, which allows them to kind of get around the patents for compressed RAW. Anyway, you can shoot in full width 4K, full width 8K, and full width 12K at those resolutions without line skipping and without like quote unquote binning.
Well, and you because of that, the rolling shutter numbers can be as good as they are because you're not, it's like it can read a full width 4K image as fast as it can, or faster, I guess, than it can read, like 12K sensor.
Yep. So
but I mean, that's a pretty impactful part of this camera that like you can pick the resolution without having to do these wild crops in on the sensor.
Which is mostly what you're used to when shooting on cinema cameras is if you're going to shoot in RAW, like if you're going to drop the resolution, how do you actually shoot in RAW without cropping in? And they have found a pretty innovative way to do it by using this higher resolution and this 6x6 pixel grid that's RGBW instead of just standard bare. Also, what that means though is if you think about it, they have to have different demosaicing algorithms for the 8K, 4K images compared to the 12K because the grouping of pixels isn't exactly the same.
Interesting.
And you're like, okay, well, if they have to demosaic differently, wouldn't that create situations where whenever the red or the white is balanced differently, you might just get different color shifts because the red pixel is in a different spot for this configuration versus that configuration?
I didn't think about that.
And in a lot of the sample footage, like comparisons that I've seen off of the 12K, the Ursa 12K, it's like perfectly matched across the board. Like they did a really, really good job having different demosaicing algorithms for like the Blackmagic raw capture on this camera, even though like it has to be different for the different resolutions.
It kind of doesn't surprise me because I feel like what makes Blackmagic different than every other camera company is that they're very concerned about the overall workflow. And you know, it's we've said before that sometimes it feels like their cameras are sort of just like a conduit for getting footage into, you know, the rest of Blackmagic's stuff for you to use. And it makes sense to me that of all companies, they would be the ones really putting time into like, let's make sure whatever mode you shoot this camera in, your colors are going to look the same. Like it'll all match. It'll all be easy to color grade in the same way. Like that makes sense.
Yeah. There are some interesting detractors as a result of doing this and also some kind of cool stuff. So I'm going to, in order to not miss anything, I'm kind of going to just run down my bullet points here. Those white photo sites can pull in 3 times more light than the color photo sites. And so that's part of the reason why they're able to have such good dynamic range is like you're getting pretty substantial, you know, reading off of those white sensors. Now, it doesn't do as good in low light. So like those white sensors kind of help a lot with the dynamic range, and like it's a mixed bag here in that because of the type of sensor this is, it does good in low light in that you have a lot of resolution and those white cells help a lot with low light performance. But because of like the base ISO of this camera, it seems like whenever you are shooting in low light, it doesn't have quite the same amount of flexibility as something like an Airy or a V-Raptor.
Yeah.
Those tend to like, they can push maybe 5 or 6 stops once you start like if you underexpose by like 3 or 4 stops, there's more latitude still that for you to work with something like a V-Raptor compared to this 12K sensor. So you're getting a lot of benefit out of those white pixels, and you do get more dynamic range and some better low light performance compared to if it was just a bare 12K sensor, but you are still kind of fighting against the resolution when it comes to low light.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes you wonder how good this sensor would be if they used one with the same technology, but you know, a 6K or 8K sensor.
Yeah, and it may not even, maybe they could do it with an 8K, but it might not really be. I guess it would be possible. It just would be totally different.
Yeah,
I think that the 12K is kind of the magic number here because it's divisible by 3 in that way.
I see.
And so the other thing with this sensor, which is farther down, is that it only has one base ISO of 800. Whereas a lot of the competitors here will have dual base ISO.
So that's again going to hurt the low light a little bit.
Yeah. So if you're cranking this thing past 60, like if you look at the images of this at 6400 ISO, it looks amazing. It looks super, super, super good. If you're going to push it to like 12,800, it's not going to be as clean as maybe like a 8K Raptor.
Yeah, I think that's been a common theme on Blackmagic cameras too, is that they look great as long as you have enough light.
Right, and I do think there's a lot of room to work with here. And if you have enough light or too much light, it works very well with extra light. Like you have 6 stops of latitude if you overexpose it on the high side. It's just you start running into issues with the low side on these things.
Yeah,
and by issues I mean like, I'm still comparing it to $24,000 to $60,000 cameras.
Yeah.
And I'm mostly talking about the performance of the Ursa. The Pyxis may be slightly different, but I would expect very similar kind of latitude and dynamic range out of the Pyxis. The other thing to note here is that the Ursa version had an anti-aliasing filter on it. And I thought that you could like flip it on and off, but I might be mixing that up with a different camera. It wasn't clear if the Pyxis will also have the anti-aliasing filter.
I thought maybe they answered that question, but I can't remember.
I can't remember either.
I'll see if I can look it up.
Seems like it would be pretty important for it to have an anti-aliasing filter just because of the resolution of the sensor, and particularly the size of the pixel pitch. So one more thing to deal with and contend with the resolution of this sensor, because you have the pixel pitch so small, how your camera and how this camera responds to diffraction is a bit different. So there's a link that I don't remember, I think I got it from a CVP video, but the CambridgeInColor.com have like some interesting articles about diffraction in photography that you can go point to, and they even have a calculator for it. And what their calculator does is it takes like, okay, if you have a lens and if you have a sensor with a certain pixel pitch, like size of those photo sites, and you have a lens on it at a certain aperture, that aperture and like the way the light diffracts is going to yield a like certain size circle of light on each pixel.
Right.
And if the size of that like circle of light is larger than the size of the pixel, then you're going to like, you could get overlapping between photo sites, and that could result in some like weird mosaicing and that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And so, moire, I guess is the word I'm looking for. Anyway, and there's a limit to like what's the optimal f-stop for a sensor, and like how small of an aperture can you go as far as like bigger f-stops. And something that's like a 5 in the pixel pitch range, you're going to be in that f8, f11 type. Like this is going to be peak, and then once you start going past that, that's when you start seeing diffraction. Something like this camera where it's 2.2, it's going to be closer to like 5.6.
Interesting.
Maybe 7.1. You're going to be a stop faster in where you need your lens to be if you're trying to achieve peak sharpness, which matters because of the resolution. I think that if you're shooting in like 8K mode and you're at f7.1, it's going to be fine. But if you're expecting to shoot in 12K and then crop down into that image by like, I want to crop a 4K section out of my 12K image, then shooting less than like f6.3, f5.6 on your lens is going to kind of matter. And like that starts impacting your light and how you're shooting and whether or not you need more ND. And so I think that there are some trade-offs for dealing with the 12K as far as what that means for like the diffraction of the light coming onto the sensor.
Yeah, I did find confirmation that the Pyxis 12K has the same optical low-pass filter that's in the Ursa 12K. And I think optical low-pass filter is an anti-aliasing filter.
It is. And that setup that they have in the Ursa 12K is very effective. Looking through a bunch of sample footage for that Ursa 12K, I mean, like really detailed type shots where it's like, here's a building and it's really far away, and there's very complex like glass with like framing around the fenestrations and stuff, and you would expect that to just moire like crazy.
Yeah.
And it just doesn't.
I mean, it makes sense that they would prioritize that on a high resolution sensor. It's like, why do you want a high resolution sensor? Like that's what you want it for.
Yeah. So like everything that I'm talking about as far as like the risk of diffraction and all this sort of stuff, that anti-aliasing filter helps a lot with that. And the combination of the two and what Blackmagic has done here is essentially like, yeah, there are some downsides that Lucas has just been blabbering on about, but generally like because of how they've like combined this optical low pass filter and the resolution, and they've done these white pixels all together as a package, this sensor is incredible and you can do so much cool stuff with it.
I remember, we talked about the Ursa 12K when it was announced, which was at NAB last year. And then at some point later, Cinedy ran all the tests on the sensor, and that's always kind of like the the moment of truth, because all these manufacturers make claims, and then the question is it actually going to measure up to those claims? And I remember on the Ursa 12K, we were pretty impressed because it actually lived up to the promises that Blackmagic said, and it felt like this was one of the first sensors, if not the first, that they released that really feels like it competes very well against everything else in the market. Like it does everything they say it would do. And it feels like if you buy a camera that has this sensor in it, you are legit getting better performance than what you can get from, a modern, like higher end mirrorless camera.
Yeah. The images out of the Ursa 12K are incredible. It has some downsides as far as latitude, and maybe you don't want to deal with Blackmagic RAW compared to shooting at something with Red RAW or going all the way up to like a Venice. But I think the Burano is maybe an apt comparison, but that has autofocus in it, and has XOCN, doesn't really have like true RAW compared to the Blackmagic RAW, so you may have more flexibility with the Blackmagic RAW. But that Ursa 12K sitting at whatever $15,000, $16,000 fully kitted out is so much value for the money comparatively to anything in the $20,000 to $60,000 range. And there's plenty of reasons to just go shoot with an Alexa. I think that people are going to shoot like big movies, like they're going to shoot with that. But people who are cross shopping something that's on a budget with like a V Raptor or a Burano, the Ursa 12K is extremely appealing, and the image and the resolution out of it are amazing. And if you need 12K resolution, if you're going to do like VR and that sort of stuff, like those higher end $60,000 cameras don't have those resolutions. You have to get into a specialty thing. And like the flexibility to just be able to shoot 8K. Like I'm so impressed by the Ursa and what it can do. And we talked like when the first dynamic range results came out, we're like, wow, the read speeds of this sensor are really, really good. It's controlling rolling shutter great, has an extremely capable dynamic range. Like, wow, like this thing can do
it's a great camera.
Like whatever you need to in like the cinema world. And taking the capability of that sensor and then bringing it down to their $3,000 camera, I'm like,
yeah, well, because they started off with this $15,000 thing, which felt like this is super cool. Like I really respect what they did here. Still probably not going to be buying a $15,000 camera at this point in my photography journey. Then they released it as body only at $7,000, which is already like, that's getting low enough where you start thinking like, I've already got a monitor, I have some batteries, like, could I just make that work? And then now they brought it down even further, and they're saying, here's a 5,000-ish camera that is, got those same like core capabilities, obviously some, it's missing some things that are on the Ursa, but yeah, I mean, it's incredible they brought the sensor that far down their lineup.
It's like, if you're shooting in an Ursa 12K workflow, having the option to add a Pyxis 12K as like a crash cam or a mobile cam that's much smaller but is resulting in the same image is really, really cool for certain productions. And then it's also super cool for, someone just like us as an example where if we're wanting to move up market into doing shoots where we need to be able to deliver like RAW or ProRes 4444 or that kind of thing, like being able to step up into this camera compared to something like, I don't know, like a 6K Komodo or whatever, or trying to like, save enough money to buy a C400 or whatever. This economizes the quality of like a much, much better cinema camera in a very interesting way.
I mean, like you said, it feels like a big step up from something like an XH2S in the way that the 6K Pyxis feels like a small step up. Like this feels like a major improvement.
Part of my problem with the original Pyxis was the low light performance and the rolling shutter comparatively. And yes, if you look at the Ursa and the Pyxis 12K, the Pyxis is just like, it's going to be worse as far as rolling shutter. Like I think that you get a 6 millisecond readout in 8K on the Ursa, and for the Pyxis it's like 13.
Yeah,
but
13 still feels acceptable.
13 is very good. For me, for like the stuff that we shoot, I like being below 20, and like if it's below 20, I can deal with it and I'm happy. 25, like there's enough wobble that it just bugs me, and I think that there's plenty of situations. Most of what we could shoot with a 25 millisecond rolling shutter and no one would care and it would be totally fine. But I just like it to be faster. Personal preference.
I mean, for a static like interview shot, the 12K would be just that at 25 milliseconds would be just fine.
It would be just fine. But for like this thing, it's like if I need 24 milliseconds and to shoot in 12K, groovy. Let's do it. But you can shoot in 8K full width, 16:9 at 11 or 3:2 at 13, or like, I mean, you can drop down to 4K. I think it's the same readout speeds, or like you can have 9K options. It's the read speeds are good. The dynamic range is better. And it's like the flexibility of the image, like being able to shoot in 3 different resolutions at full width without cropping
Yeah.
is super, super cool.
It is.
I think
Do you know how this color matches with other Blackmagic products? Because one thing I think about is it's super cool they brought this camera down to, the $5,000 mark, but you still have Pyxis at 3K, Blackmagic Cinema camera at, like 2,500-ish. Do those color match to the sensor? Because I could see it being nice as like a B cam type situation.
so. I don't know if they 100% color match or not. I know that DaVinci Resolve Color Science 5 is a significant improvement over the previous versions of their color science for the conversion of Blackmagic RAW. I don't know if every Blackmagic RAW shooting camera can use Color Science 5.
Interesting.
And that's what you would want to use with this camera.
Yeah.
It will probably match reasonably fine with a 6K or a Cinema 6K. But I would be surprised if it didn't.
Yeah,
Some of the older stuff, maybe not.
I think it's an interesting option because I think about, what if you wanted to buy a Pyxis 12K and then, pick up maybe you get a used Cinema camera 6K for $2,000 and it uses the same lens mount, but, it's just this little tiny self-contained camera. Use it as your B cam, like the rolling shutter, et cetera, is not going to be as good, but like if it color matches, it's an interesting option to have like that possibility.
Yeah, and you have the flexibility of Blackmagic RAW with both of those cameras. And so I think that you'll be able to get it there and it'll be a lot easier than dealing with things that are shooting in like a compressed HEVC format or even ProRes. So it'll probably be close enough that it's fine. I don't know.
Yeah.
Do you think that the frames per second on this Pyxis 12K are a problem comparatively? Because they're not, like, I don't think it has any modes that will shoot 120.
I actually thought they were pretty impressive. When I think about high frame rate stuff, I think about certain types of productions. Like, honestly, a lot of what people do with like vloggy type footage or whatever, where they want to add some super slow motion, or, obviously people use high speed cameras for certain purposes. But most of the time when we've been filming stuff, I feel like we don't need to go above 60. I mean, the Fuji can shoot, 120, no problem, but I just feel like most of the time we're not actually doing slow motion. And if anything, I was surprised at how high some of these frame rates were. And the fact that there are plenty of modes where you can get, 60 FPS or higher. I mean, it's like you can get 8K 17:9 up to 90 frames per second. I think for what this camera is, that's totally fine.
Yeah, I tend to agree. Having a camera that can shoot 120 was extremely important to me years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, being able to get that, 5:1 slow-mo or 4:1, depending upon your final delivery frame rate, you can get some really cool looking footage. I've found that for 90% of what we shooting in 4K 60 is just a better option for me because like on the XH2S, it's uncropped. And so you're getting an oversampled 4K resolution at 60 frames per second. And that image looks substantially better than the 4K 120 pixel to pixel image. Maybe not substantially. It just looks better. The 240 stuff looks terrible.
There was a time, I want to say like maybe 2017, 2018, like when Peter McKinnon was first kind of doing his YouTube thing, there was this time when everyone was doing their B-roll with an 85 millimeter lens at 120 frames per second.
It looks delicious.
It does. But it's a certain style. And I don't think it makes sense for every video. And I don't see that as much now as I used to.
Wasn't it like the Zack Snyder cut of Justice League? If you sped up all of the slow-mo, it would have been like 60 minutes shorter or something stupid.
That sounds familiar.
I forget the statistic.
Yeah.
But what I found is being able to slow it down to 40% or 50% using 60p instead of 24 or 30p is pretty much as slow as I am mostly ever needing for quick shots. And like optical flow in your NLEs has gotten super good that you can kind of push it. Like you can go even slower than true 1:1 and it mostly looks fine.
Same with stabilization, because I feel like the other reason people sometimes shoot in high frame rate is, I can get some B-roll. It's going to be nice and smooth. Like, it's not going to have camera shake. I feel like stabilization, even like in software, has gotten good enough that it's just not that big of a deal.
Yeah.
I don't know. I like I said, if anything, I was impressed that these frame rates were as high as they are.
Yeah, being able to get 4K or 8K up to 72 in open gate, wow, and then 84 at a 16:9, to me that's like good enough for anything that I can see myself shooting. And the fact that like there's no loss in frame rate going from 4K to 8K because of the way this sensor works.
Yeah.
And so it's like you can just shoot 8K at 72 frames per second in open gate full width at a 13 millisecond readout. That's like it's absurd.
Yeah.
Like, there's no mirrorless camera that's doing that.
It's great having those the resolution.
I take that back. The A1 II I think can do that. No, sorry, the A93. Anyways, go on.
It's great having a camera that gets that kind of resolution, because especially if you need to deliver in multiple formats, like shoot a little bit wider, and then you've got a lot of room to crop around. Having that resolution is great.
Mm-hmm. And this thing, just like the original Pyxis, will ship with EFPL or L mount. Mm-hmm. And going with L mount and then getting something with like an ND option to convert to EF could be cool.
Yep. Yeah, that's one thing that people were disappointed on. People wanted internal ND. They say there's not room in the camera. A little hard to believe based on some other cameras that include it, but it's their choice. They did it. It doesn't bother me that much. With everything else that you get on this camera, I feel like, you get a lens adapter or just use a normal ND filter. Totally fine.
Yeah, so no ND, no stabilization either.
Mm-hmm. And I would say, nothing besides RAW. You don't get ProRes. Mm-hmm. Not like that Red Komodo. And I think you get H.264 proxies, but
sure.
it does still have that limitation. I think it's maybe a little easier to forgive given everything the camera can do. But I still have to think about it a little bit because it is a downside to me.
Yeah, it can be for sure. This does tend to gear itself towards certain workflows. Mm-hmm. Having IBIS or lens stabilization has been so important to me for a lot of the stuff that we shoot. But like once you start getting into like this kind of camera territory, unless you're shooting like really long telephoto, man, it almost looks better without the IBIS.
I think it depends on the type of work you're doing. I mean, I feel like most of the stuff you're doing with a camera like this, you're going to have it on a tripod or, rigged out in some way. You could use a shoulder rig. Like you've got a lot of ways to get pretty stable footage. And if you're looking for something that you can run around an event with and like grab some quick clips, this probably isn't your camera. And that's when I would want IBIS.
Yeah, for sure. I was so impressed with, I don't know, whenever we were first talking about it, it's like, yeah, sure, they're going to take the 12K sensor and stick it in the 6K and whatever. It changes this camera for me. It's at $5,000 or $5,500. Like all of a sudden, the Pyxis is this incredible option. Even compared to what it was before at $3,000, I was like, wow, this is a pretty good price for a camera for what you get. I think that value, they like almost doubling it in price. I think they more than doubled what you get just by swapping to this newer sensor.
And I mean, you think about like, well, what do you have to add to it to make it usable? It's really not that bad. I mean, I think for you and me, we basically already have everything you would need to, pick it up and start using it in terms of like having a monitor. We probably need to get some kind of adapter for the battery, but we have V-mount batteries. Like you really don't need that much to get started with it. You don't need any weird expensive media modules. I had to buy some CF Express cards, but it doesn't seem that bad to rig out. And then even their accessories are not that expensive. I think their monitor is $300. If you want an EVF, that gets expensive. The EVF's like $1,500 or something.
I think the monitor...
These things all seem reasonably priced to me.
The monitor situation does become a little more interesting on this camera in that I'm pretty sure you can shoot like ProRes or like H.265 on a Ninja with this thing. I don't think the Blackmagic Video Assist does that.
Yeah, that's correct.
But the Ninja will, and I mean, I've looked around and I assume you can. I know that there's maybe some like weirdness between Blackmagic and Atomos, but if you could pop a Ninja on this thing and all of a sudden like now I have my H.265 my ProRes options if I don't need to shoot in RAW, that's kind of interesting. However, if you're shooting with a Blackmagic monitor, you can do things like touch the screen.
Yeah.
And when they add autofocus, like touch to track autofocus may be something that you could only do through a monitor that's USB-C that supports that functionality. Yep. And the monitor itself isn't going to have any sort of record modes. And so now you're stuck recording to the camera into the CF Express or to like an external SSD. I think that maybe like creates some compromise with how you use this camera.
Maybe.
If shooting on Blackmagic RAW is not the only thing
Yeah.
you're going to do.
I feel like realistically, I would end up, I have a Ninja. I would end up buying the Blackmagic monitor, and I would just pick and choose what to use based on the situation. Because I feel like we were saying earlier, the Ninja is fine as a monitor, but it's not the ideal monitor. And so I feel like I would just rig the camera appropriately depending on what I was doing. If I needed the H.265, I'd use the Ninja. If I didn't, I'd probably want the Blackmagic monitor.
I just imagine that if I was doing things like touch to track autofocus or needed auto, like assuming they bring it to this camera, if I needed autofocus, those are usually the situations where I also need to deliver in a faster format.
Yeah, that's true.
And so it's like, is that going to get weird?
You'd have to plug them both in.
Maybe put one on the side like a director's monitor.
Yeah,
and then one on the top.
I think we're kind of joking a little bit, but not that much, right? Like you have a monitor, or on the top, and then just like put the Ninja flat up against it. Like you could do it.
Well, do you think that maybe you could just use the monitor that's on the side of the Pyxis for that?
There you go. Just look at the side of the.
You just like flip it. Yeah, just look at that. I mean, I don't know. I don't know, man.
Unlikely. I don't think you're going to want to frame shots by looking at the side of your camera.
Well, no, but you would have maybe you could use that for focusing, and then
I don't know. Maybe. Who knows? Who knows? We'll see.
I don't know. It's an interesting conundrum, especially depending upon what features they add to this overall. I think that the live stuff that they added is really, really cool.
What did they add there?
Well, like this thing comes with the 10 gig Ethernet, and it goes into supporting just a lot of the improvements that they did with live streaming off of these cameras for a broadcast solution. And I don't want to get into all the new stuff that they added, but it seems like they're really focused on just being able to hook up all these cameras to Ethernet and like running it back to wherever you need to run it back to for doing like either live broadcasting kind of things, or you're shooting on set, but you're feeding it back to like a director's room or back to people who are like cutting your dailies.
Like a camera to cloud type workflow.
Yeah, where you can just get it into your editing suite ASAP.
Yeah.
A lot of that stuff is pretty neat.
Yeah, and I think you can actually with the Pyxis 6K, you can use the Blackmagic camera app on the phone to control it. I'm sure they're going to do the same for this. Like it's neat to have. Most cameras now have an app, but that's kind of cool. You have that option too.
Definitely. Okay, so I have kind of two more things on this. But what are your other overall thoughts on the Pyxis 12K?
I mean, I agree with what you said. I think it was a really impressive release for them. Earlier in this show, I said I think they planned to do this all along. I still feel that way. I think they were happy with the 6K. Obviously they like that sensor. But I think that when they designed the physical design of this camera, I think they had in mind that they were eventually going to bring the 12K sensor to it. They probably get some benefits from, they'll be ordering more of those sensors now because they're probably going to sell more of these than they will of the Ursa 12K. And so that probably drives their prices down, to have that commonality. So I think it makes a lot of sense for them to release. In terms of a camera that I could see us using for work, I feel like it's the most exciting thing we've seen in a long time, where we've talked about some cameras on this show, like I was really into the C80, and we thought the C400 was cool, but that one's kind of expensive. But it just feels like there hasn't really been anything that's been at an approachable enough price that we could imagine buying one or two of them, and offering enough over what we're doing now. And this feels like this changes that equation significantly.
I would tend to agree with that. Do you think that this is going to be overshadowed by the release of the Fujifilm Eterna?
I don't. I think they're totally not in the same ballpark or consideration at all.
So whenever I was putting these notes together, like almost a week ago at this point, I wrote down why Daniel is wrong about the Fujifilm Eterna, but now I'm trying to remember what you were wrong about. Yeah, so please tell me why you hate this camera.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So so the GFX Eterna, was announced a while back. They've been kind of trickling out information since then.
They had it on display at NAB, just in a glass case or something.
I think they announced some new, it will also support X, Y, and Z, and I can't remember what those things were, but. So I can't remember.
It's going to have more resolution. It's
have they actually decent. Have they announced a price yet?
I don't know if
I don't think they have. I'm assuming somewhere around $10,000 would be my guess.
Yeah,
The
probably.
price of that camera. I think the GFX Eterna is a vibe cam. That's what I said that you didn't like.
boy.
I think it's less about the features it provides and like the technical capabilities, and mostly about the Eterna aspect of like, you know, you're getting really cool colors from this, and you can shoot in your medium format and all that. I think that's it. I think it's like artsy, but not technically the best thing.
Didn't they announce that it's going to run on the going to have include the same battery as the XH2S?
They did. They said it's going to support the NPW235, which is what the XH2S and the XT5 use. And I'm like, is it so you can put 4 of them in there like one of those old mag lights? Like, how is that going to work? And I think the answer is that it's for hot swapping. So I think you can put one of those in there to give your camera like just enough power for you to swap out, you know, whatever V-mount or similar thing you have on the back.
Yeah, I think it was like B or V on the back or something like that.
A ridiculous idea.
But cool that they have an internal battery so you can hop swap.
It's just, I think I just have a harder time taking Fuji seriously in this market because I know the GFX 102 is kind of marketed in a video context. I know Fuji makes cinema lenses and etc., but they haven't made a camera like this before. So like already I'm thinking, do they really know what people want? Like how much, you know, have they looked, how much research have they done with that? How much experience do they have with that? And then just the fact that it's medium format and the fact that they're branding it Eterna, I feel like they're marketing based on people who want the Fuji look and who want like a film simulation look. And it's to me, it just feels in contrast to Blackmagic, who's like, here's this 12K sensor with amazing rolling shutter and like technical feature 1, technical feature 2, technical feature 3. And like, it just seems like a different class of thing to me.
They did announce that it's going to have electronic variable ND built in.
It has that, and the Pyxis doesn't, but the Ursa does. I think the Ursa has. I don't know. I don't think it's electronic. I think the Ursa's is optical.
The electronic stuff is really cool to have, especially if you can do exposure controlled electronic, where it's like modulating the exposure. And they said that they could do it in like 10th increments, which is pretty cool. Whenever we saw that on the Burano and some of the other Sony cameras that have the electronic ND, they're not as good as optical.
Yeah.
You do get some color shifting that you have to contend with, especially for...
a little skeptical of it.
Yeah, so like I think it's going to be great to have, but I think it will result in some magenta shifting.
Yeah.
But, well, that's all TBD.
Yeah. I think ultimately my issue with that camera is my guess of the price being what I'm thinking it would be. And it just feels like, okay, if this was $5,000, I could see it being a hard decision between the Pyxis and the GFX Eterna. At $10,000, I'm just thinking, man, I think I'd rather have a C400.
Sure, yeah, I could see that. I mean, the thing's going to be 11,000 by 8,000 pixels. It's basically a 12 megapixel sensor also.
12K, you mean?
Yeah, that's what I meant. What'd you say?
I didn't say anything.
Oh, okay. Anyways, if we look at the GFX 100 RF, Daniel, that thing's got, look at all those crop modes. Yeah. I bet this thing will do that.
So how come you said you seemed really excited in the Pyxis 12K earlier? You tell me why aren't you feeling that way about the GFX Eterna?
I think I'm super on board with the GFX Eterna. If the GFX Eterna comes out and it's the same price as the Pyxis 12K, I'm going to have the hardest time in the world.
Well, yeah, that's why, and I agree. I think if it was $5,000, it would be, you know, it's more in consideration. Yeah, because then it competes with different cameras at that point.
It does. And that's like what's going to happen here, right? Is if they price it to compete with a C400, it is very different than if they price it to compete with even a bare Ursa 12K at $7,000.
Yeah.
If that's the market, if it's $7,000 compete with an Ursa 12K, that's going to be a really hard sell. I think the Ursa 12K is probably going to be the better buy across the board. But if they're going to compete with something like a Pyxis 12K, I think that now becomes extremely interesting because of the flexibility of that 102 megapixel sensor is pretty interesting. The Blackmagic is probably going to have better rolling shutter. The Fuji is probably going to have better codec options. Like you'll most likely get an H.265 and Blackmagic RAW over HDMI and stuff like that. And so, or maybe STI, who knows? I think that where Fuji lands with the Eterna will be a very interesting to this market, and also whatever Panasonic releases in May. Yeah,
Panasonic's rumored to announce a compact L-mount cinema camera on May 13th.
Yeah,
we'll see if it happens.
We'll. I'm really curious to see what happens there because it seems like this space is heating up.
Yeah.
And where I was maybe less bullish on the Pyxis 6K, I'm extremely excited and supportive of the Pyxis 12K. And unless, if we decide to move up market with the services we provide, having to choose between like a Fujifilm Eterna, a Pyxis 12K, and like maybe some future magical Panasonic camera that competes in the same realm, I mean, I'd be real happy to have to pick between all those.
Yeah, it feels like a luxury of options there.
It sure does.
The other things that have happened recently, the Ronin 4D 6K version has dropped in price to $5,000. I think it was $6,700 before. It's the new price. That's kind of an interesting camera. I think sensor-wise, it's not that great, but it's cinema adjacent, I would say. And it's been used on some shows recently.
That adolescent show on Netflix is the big one that's interesting.
Yeah, and then
they took the thing and they connected it to a drone, and then they flew the drone all in one shot, no cut.
Yeah, because they did those entire episodes with no cuts.
Crazy.
Yes. And then the Komodo going down to $3,000, which I think we talked about last week. How do you think? What do you think? Komodo at $3,000 versus Pyxis 12K at $5,000. Is that an interesting
I take
debate
that
for you at all? Or
no,
do you think 12K?
I would take the Pyxis 12K every time. I think that's way more interesting of a camera.
Yeah.
Unless I needed the global sensor or Red Raw, I think that the Pyxis is more interesting to me.
Why is it more interesting?
I think that the capabilities and the dynamic range that you get out of that 12K sensor, the ability to shoot in those 4K, 8K resolutions in full width is at like decent rolling shutters is much more interesting. I think that you're going to get more dynamic range and a better image and more capability and options comparatively to a 5 or 6 or a 6-year-old, 5-year-old Komodo 6K.
Yeah, full frame versus Super 35.
Yep.
Yeah, definitely a big difference there. And
L mount lenses are going to be cheaper.
Yeah, I'd be more interested in getting into L mount than RF. So I agree.
Yeah, for sure. I'm super pumped about this thing, man. I think that I'm like, is 2026 Pyxis 12K year? Like, maybe. I don't know.
Big question.
I want to see how the rest of this year shakes out. And I don't think that we move on any new sort of camera situation until like end of the year. But
yeah, well, with this
one, hemming and haw about this one for a while.
With this one, they're saying release is in July. I think with the Pyxis, it
wasn't in people's hands until like January.
They
were
pretty far behind, but in Blackmagic's favor, they've already been shipping the Ursa. They've already been shipping the Pyxis. This feels like it would have fewer unknowns. Like they should understand it better than maybe they did for the first Pyxis. So I would think it wouldn't be too delayed, but
I do want to see it in people's hands.
Yeah, we're going to want to see test results, like make sure that everything sensor-wise is the same as the Ursa, except for the rolling shutter, which we already have numbers on. You want to see like what people think of it, make sure there's no big caveats, because that's what happened with the Burano. Remember, the Burano seemed really good on paper, and then it came out and it was like, well, like, okay, asterisks, there's all these problems. That's not really Blackmagic style. Like, they don't usually overpromise. So I think it'll play out and be good. But yeah, we're just gonna have to wait and see.
Yeah, we'll let this thing hit market. I don't think it's unreasonable that you and I probably need to rent one of these things.
No,
maybe use it for a shoot or something, and then go from there.
Yeah, I think it's a cool camera though.
It's very cool. I'm super excited about it.
Definitely for me, the most exciting thing that came out from NAB. I felt like, honestly, NAB was a little disappointing this year.
Interesting. I mean, they did announce that new Cintel scanner G3 HDR plus 8x16. It's like a $32,000 film scanner.
Blackmagic makes so many weird products, man. I don't know. I don't even know what that is.
$32,000 film scanner.
You could buy, 6 Pyxises for that? 6 Pyxi?
Sure could. But no, you'd rather shoot on film.
No, I wouldn't.
Got to get that Vision 500T and your $32,000 Cintel G3 HDR plus 8x16.
That's it for the show today. Thanks for joining us, and if you liked it, tell a friend so they can check it out too. You can find out more about the show at www.cameragearpodcast.com, and you can find us on Twitter @CameraGearPod. We'll be back with more next week.